I'm Ian Edwards, Councillor Ian Edwards, and I'm Chairman of the Central and South Planning Committee. Before we get into the business proper, a couple of introductions, introductory announcements. First of all, welcome to you for attending this evening, and also anybody who may be following us online. The planning committees are captured on CCTV, and this one is now kicked in. Cameras up ahead facing this way, so members of the public in the public gallery are not on the screen. However, anybody who speaks as a petitioner or in response to the petition will be visible on the screen and is captured on YouTube. Fire alarms, one isn't expected tonight, so if the fire alarm does sound, we will be evacuating, and the best way out through the double doors. The double door is directly ahead, off towards the left-hand side, rather round to the right, and down the stairs is the speediest way out of the building, and that is the way we will probably take you. If that's blocked for any reason, there are fire exits behind us. Don't panic, we will all be leaving at the same time, and we are familiar with the building. We will ensure your safe evacuation. Mobile devices, if I could ask colleagues and members of the public, please to ensure the mobile phones are turned to silent, so we're not disturbed. Residents' feedback forms, and people who may be following us online, there is a pull-down menu, enables you to provide feedback. We do encourage feedback. We try to improve our meetings to ensure they're accessible to our residents. They understand what we're doing, so please be open with your comments. They go to the democratic services and not to the committee members themselves. So please be frank with your comments. We do learn from your feedback. Now, there are some bits in the agenda that we will dance through quickly, and but first of all I want to just try and explain a little bit about part one and part two of the meeting. Although we're meeting in public, this isn't a public meeting, which means that there are no general speaking rights. The only people that are able to address the committee are petitioners and agent or applicant in response to the petition. Also ward councillors for each of the matters before us. And those speaking rights are described in the Constitution. They're summarised or preceded in the papers that you have access to, and they're time constrained. And I'll get into the detail when we get to the petition. Okay. Part one and part two of the meeting. Part one are all of the public applications. This is the matters that before you, as I say, the meeting in public. Part two are private matters. These are relating to enforcement and other confidential matters which are not considered in public. And the reason we don't discuss enforcement in public is that it could end up in prosecutions, and it can cause difficulties to discuss detail in such matters. However, the item itself and the decision of the committee is published. It's just the discussion that isn't. There will be a break between part one and part two, and I will, if anybody remains in the room at the end of part one, I would be inviting you to leave, and we do then break the CCTV link. So that explains a little bit about the meeting, and let me explain all of the people in the room to you, the formal part of the room, and why we're here and what we're doing. The committee is made up of councillors, and they are the voting members of the committee. As chairman, I only vote in the event of a tied or split vote. Okay. Now, let me introduce the councillors to you, and I'll start on my far right-hand side. Councillor Stead, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Chamdal, Councillor Ahmed Walana, Councillor Yarrow. Starting on my left-hand side, Councillor Morse, Councillor Money, and Councillor Kashid. The other people in the room are officers of the council. Rosin Hogan is our legal advisor. Luke Taylor, Democratic Services, retains the minutes, keeps us in order. James Rogers is head of planning and will give expert planning advice if necessary. Zainab Haji Ismail is the presenting officer, is our principal planning officer, and will be presenting each application in full. Alan Telly is our transport and aviation manager. Okay. The committee are provided with the papers and the plans before the meeting, so we have full details of it, and that does mean that sometimes the presenting officer doesn't have to cover everything that's in it. They're only trying to bring the salient points out for us. So that's how we're going about. I do have to go through a little bit of formalities. Okay, so please, I hope you will bear with us while we just dance through item one, which is apologies for absence.
We've had no apologies.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Item two. Any additional declarations of interest, colleagues? None. Thank you. To sign and receive the minutes of the meeting of the 31st of October. Thank you very much. Item 4, matters that have been notified in advance or urgent. There are none. Item 5, and this is to confirm there are Part 1 and Part 2 to this meeting. So we do have enforcement issues to discuss, so we will be breaking after the end of Part 1. So then we're now into item agenda 6. Okay, this is when we now slow down a little bit. This is an application with a petition, and it is land adjacent to 1 Belgrave Mews. Sinan.
Okay, so this application relates to the erection of a single-storey garage at number 6 Belgrave, the land adjacent to number 1 Belgrave Mews. So it's that plot to the northern side there. The application is for the erection of a single-storey garage on a single plot of land. As it's indicated in the addendum sheet, this application is not for an outbuilding. This is being considered as a single-storey garage. The application is being reported to committee because there is a petition, but also an appeal has been lodged against non-determination. Should we have made a recommendation, it would have been a refusal. That is because the application, because of its location outside the established building lines, the overall size, scale, height and design would result in a visually obtrusive form of development to the detriment of the street scene. I will just run you through the presentation now. So this is a site location. This is the proposed garage. As you can see, it's 10 feet, so it is the height and the scale outside of this established building line here. So you can see there is an established building line, and this would sit in an awkward, so visually prominent position there. And this is the proposal and some photos. So this is showing you where the location, the location of the proposed garage there. For that reason, our recommendation is, if we were to consider this application, it would be a refusal.
Thank you. Cheers. Okay, we do have a petition. Ms. Bakiri, present. I understand that you are having a friend or neighbour speak on your behalf, and that's fine. That is quite okay. If your friend or neighbour would like to come forward, you can come forward as well. That's quite okay. Make yourselves comfortable at the seat, at the 2 seats, okay? Sure. Now, before you will see a microphone. And there is, at the front, a button, and that is on the base. There's a toggle on and toggle off button. That turns the microphone on and off, okay? It's important that when you're speaking, that we do speak through the microphone. As I say, this is captured on the internet. Okay, yeah, it's there forever. We're in the ether forever. But what you say can't be heard and captured if you don't use the microphone. If it is just in support of what's being said, then the present verbal presentation will be sufficient. Okay. Now I need to explain to you. You have 5 minutes speaking time. Hopefully the lighting system works. It doesn't always. It does. I'm told it is. You will see in front of you the lights. Green light will show for 4 minutes. Amber light will show for 1. And when the red light starts, I need to bring you to a close. And that's because I need to be fair to everybody, and I need to sort of strictly observe the 5-minute limitation. Okay? Lovely. That's absolutely fine. What I would invite you to do is to present the petition using the microphone, but if you would first introduce your name, because that isn't at the moment a matter of record. Okay? So over to you for your petition. Thank you.
My name is Holly Singer, and I live at 15 Belgrave Mews. We've lived there for about 10 years. We strongly support Hillingdon Council in its recommendation that the proposal be refused. At the moment, the land is used as a parking space for 2 cars. If granted, this right will be taken away from the residents, just as the right to park in the previous lands next to the garages that were taken away from the residents from Mr. Davey, Belgrave Mews in the past. To further clarify this point, Mr. Davey does not live in Belgrave Mews. He owns number 8, which is rented, and owns a further 3 garages, one of which is a double, and neither of these 4 parking spaces have actually been used to park cars. We want to know what the purpose of this garage is. We don't know whether he's doing this to put a proposal for a single flat again, which was denied by the council, and we appreciate that very much. Although Mr. Davey owns the land, in the deed it specifies that there are third parties involved, such as the land being subject to the rights of drainage and rights in respect of water, gas, and electricity supplied. We have what is that? A deed number, if relevant, you can have. The land tinted yellow on the filed plan is subject to the rights of use for the purpose only of storing refuse. The land is subject to rights of to be used as a car parking area. And we have a registry and a deed that says that it is clearly stated in the deed that we have the right to park in this area, that he wants to build a garage, a private garage on. On the previous application made by Mr. Davey before my friend here moved into 1 Belgrave Mews, he contacted Cress Homes in 2000, in Neighbours. Oh, you've contacted Crest Homes in 1999. They built the properties. They wrote back to the residents and stated that on both occasions it was made clear to Mr. Davey that he accepted the land subject to all existing legal enforceable third-party rights. It was left to Mr. Davey to determine what those rights may be, which would be clear to him as he lives close by. Mr. Davies has requested on many occasions for the Beharies to move their car from this area, which is a public place to park. He's done that verbally and in writing, and he said that if they didn't move it immediately, he would involve the police and get it removed for them. He hasn't done this as of yet, but it's a threat that is constantly there. The fence that's around this area as well has been damaged and is...
That jeopardizes our security because anyone could go at the back.
And could jeopardize its security because anybody can go at the back of the property of 1 Belgrave Mews. The fence that Mr. Davey has placed in the land has frequently been damaged by strong wind. On the first occasion, Mr. Davey approached a number of pensioners on that side of the road and took money to rebuild the fence. As it is his property and he was the one to place the fence, he really should have paid for it himself. Additionally, all the houses in Belgrave Mews have the exact same plan. We all have 40 meters squared. With his 4 garages, he has more space than his house, number 8. If Mr. Davey is granted permission to build a garage, then surely we can also apply for the same permission without obstruction from the council, as it would fit the criteria. Hypothetically, the garage will be within the building line. Unlike Mr. Davey, both sides of the garage will be in a straight line. One of the lines is slanted. Having said this, the space between the edge of 1 Belgrave Mews and the side of the land adjacent to number 1 Belgrave Mews is more than 5 meters, which is more than enough space to build a double garage and turn it into a studio flat. Similarly, number 7 Belgrave Mews could also apply to do the same, as they have also space adjacent to their house, the same with number 16. Granting of permission for this garage, however erroneous, would set the undesirable precedent for homeowners to do the same, which would further harm the appearance of the Mews. If we keep adding garages to Belgrave Mews, then this road will no longer resemble a peaceful community, and look worse. Why does Mr. Davies need a 5th garage with all the space he has? Shouldn't the amount of garages you have be equal to the amount of houses that you have? I think, bottom line, the residents feel that, I will look right off, my house is number 15, we will look right opposite it, and it does change the way that the Mews looks, and changes the access that the other residents have to the area. So we definitely oppose it. Anything else you want to say?
Thank you very much. No, well timed.
There you go.
Colleagues, are there any questions at all? Petitioner, clarification? No questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you, sorry.
No, it's quite all right. I invite you to return to your seat. If you could turn the microphone off before you depart, that would be great. At this moment in time, that's not necessary, okay? I'll explain a little bit as we go along. Right, colleagues, before we get into discussion, the petitioners have drawn reference to a number of factors, some of which, as you will be aware, but petitioners may not be aware, we cannot consider. What might happen in the future about other planning applications is not something that we can take into account here. We have to accept what is before us, and we have to consider each application on its own merits. And this isn't an application, as was described by Zainab, that this isn't an application for us to agree or not agree tonight. It's to say, if we were asked, this is what we would have said. The actual decision is going to be made elsewhere. Okay, so I want to clear that out. An important part that I took from your petition was the loss of parking and parking rights. And I'd like to bring in our head of planning here. Sorry, I do need to clarify. Is there an agent or applicant present? No. My apologies. I do need to properly give the agent or applicant the right to respond. And I had been advised, and I should have checked, that they were not present. Okay. Thank you, and I appreciate that. You do mention on there the loss of parking and the rights that the residents have to presently park, and the building of the garage would remove those rights. I need our head of planning to comment on that in terms of this planning committee.
So officers have checked the title deed, so I'm not coming at this particular question cold. So there's definitely a separate land parcel which is identified in the PowerPoint presentation and the plan pack. So this needs to be treated as a freestanding parcel of land and not necessarily a garage in connection with a particular unit in Belgrave Mews, because if planning permission were granted, it would there is no powers we have to connect it to a particular dwelling house. But what I would say is the applicant is definitely the landowner, and if there are, with respect to any restrictive covenants in the title deeds, they would be a separate matter, something that if I know members have heard us mention this before, and I know the legal officer would be able to clarify in slightly more detail, but effectively the restrictive covenants are a civil law issue and not covered by the planning law. So effectively what you are just considering tonight is purely whether a single garage is acceptable within the landmarks read on the application plan. I don't think there are any further considerations for you to make as a planning committee. What we have done is set out in full the planning history for Belgrave Mews, and what I would highlight to the committee is that although one extension was allowed to number 21, you'll see a consistent pattern of refusals. So what in effect has happened is officers have consistently taken the view that developments that aren't involving extensions to the existing properties, that involve developments on odd parcels of land, are out of keeping with Belgrave Mews. And in fact, an application for a detached garage on this very site was refused in 2002. So I must stress that point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, in summary, some of the issues that you talked around the rights, they are matters, regretfully, that are outside the consideration of this committee. And it is rather strange. Members of the public generally expect the planning committee to be able to take into account all the considerations of a building. And actually, it's been described to me that somebody can put in a planning application for an upside-down pyramid. And if it didn't cause any planning harm, we'd agree, even though it's impossible to build. You know, that is the limitations of the planning committee. There are matters that we can't consider. We have to consider planning harms, and those are the considerations here. Now, you did mention in your report that it would change the way the Mews looks. And that is the matter that is very firmly picked up by the officers and forms the basis for the refusal recommendation. Now, colleagues, let me open this up for any discussion or comment, please. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think there's any need for any great discussion on this one. I think the reasons for refusal are quite clearly stated on page 9 in NON 2, non-standard reasons for refusal. And I would support the officer's recommendation to refuse.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chapman?
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you. And I presume this is noting the addendum, item 6. So the wording is the planning inspectorate be advised that had an appeal for non-determination been lodged, the application would have been refused for this reason. And you must also note in there the correction to the report regarding HDAS. So that is formally proposed and formally seconded by Councillor Chapman. Do I have a show of hands on this one, please? That is everybody. So the position is that the committee would have formally refused this had it come before us, and we will advise the planning inspector of that. Ultimately, though, it is a decision now for the planning inspector. However, I hope they will be influenced by our discussion and decision. So thank you very much for your petition. Thank you. We now turn, please, to agenda item 7, Brunel University.
Okay, so item 7...
Please, you feel free to leave as you wish. You can remain, though, and listen to the other applications, but don't feel obliged to. If you are to leave, I just invite you to do so quietly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Item 7 relates to Brunel University on Kingston Lane. This application seeks planning permission to install a petrol and diesel storage tank together with surrounding fencing, brickwork, pipework, vents, traffic barriers. It should be noted by members that this building is locally listed. Having considered the immediate context, it is a service area between two very large buildings. So officers consider this proposal will not have a detrimental or significant impact on the openness of the green belt, given its siting, and nor will it have any impact on amenities of adjacent occupiers. So the proposal is considered acceptable and we recommend approval. So just to run you through some pictures, this is the location, you can see outlined in red, and this is where it's being placed. So it's in between some very large buildings, and as such we don't consider, especially with the proposed screening that's to come as well, that it will have any major impact on the openness of the green belt.
Thank you, Zana. Any questions, colleagues? Councillor Stead.
Thank you, Chairman. We used to, when they had storage of fuel and stuff like that, used to have what they call a bund around the site to collect any spillages to stop it spreading further. Would that be applicable to this application, please?
Good question. So,
we can, if a condition hasn't already been secured, it's something we could consider adding to this application. So
the key thing here is we did consult the Environmental Protection Unit and the Flood and Water Management Officer. So I think we consulted the two key people, and although the Environmental Protection Unit officer didn't have any concerns, the Flood and Water Management Officer was more did have some interest in the proposal, but we've covered that through an informative in this particular case, which is informative. One. I'm not sure what else to say other than that.
I mean, I think it is a very valid point that's being made here by the councillor, which is what measures are we looking to require to be implemented to mitigate any risk of accidental spillage, either in terms of when they're loading or offloading, or even leakage to plant and equipment established on there. How is that controlled and prevented from the watercourse or drainage being inundated with fuel?
I can perhaps help members further, so I probably wasn't that helpful in my first answer. So obviously informative doesn't carry, it is just advising the applicant. So if members felt strongly about this, you could turn that informative into a condition requiring a management plan as to how they would prevent the issues being raised by the Flood and Water Management Officer. So if members have to delegate to me, I'm sure that that informative could be turned into a condition requiring a management plan as to how they will prevent issues occurring, rather than simply being an advisory informative.
Thank you, Councillor Stead. Would that meet your
Yes,
concern?
that'll do fine, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Yarrow.
Yeah, it's really just an addition to what Councillor Stead says, which I think is a valid point, and that is I can't see anywhere in the report that it tells us how many hundreds of gallons this tank is going to hold. Is it 50 gallons, 100 gallons, 1,000 gallons? That makes a difference in to what Councillor Stead was saying. If it leaks, it could be a real mess.
That's noted. I hope, though, that you would accept the suggestion put forward by the Head of Planning, which is a delegated authority, to change that informative into a condition that they need to get sign-off for us of the arrangements that would be appropriate to the uses being made. And that would allow them to look at the size of the amount of fuel to be stored to ensure that the protective measures are adequate for that size of storage, rather than get into the detail now of how big the tanks may or may not be.
No, that's perfect. It'd just be nice to be part of the information, that's all, for the future.
I understand we do actually have that information. I wasn't aware that we were.
It's a 2,000 litre tank.
It's quite a bit of fuel, and therefore I do think that we need to make sure that that informative is turned to a condition, delegated authority to the Head of Planning to do so, to ensure that the adequate management and control measures are brought in to mitigate against any loss of fuel. Okay.
I'd just like to support Councillor Yarrow's point, because how do we do risk assessment on this unless we know the amount of storage? I was a bit confused by when I read this report, so I'm extremely pleased with going down this route.
Thank you.
Sorry, there's also a 900 litre diesel tank as well.
Okay, so we're talking about 3,000 litres of fuel, which is a fair amount, and therefore there needs to be very adequate measures here to prevent escape, either in delivery. I mean, delivery can also be a factor here. So I think that changing the informative into a condition is very helpful, with delegation here to the Head of Planning to do that and ensuring that we sign off the appropriate measures. Okay, I'm looking now for Councillor Ahmed Bolana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Subject to the any proposed conditions, I'm happy to support the application and go with the officer's recommendations to approve the application.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Do I have a second to Councillor Kashif? Thank you. A show of hands, please. That is formally agreed. Thank you.
Okay.
Agenda item 8, Wilfred Brown Building.
Thank you, Chair. So moving on to item 8, the Wilfred Brown Building. This application seeks a variation of condition of relating to energy strategy for the Wilfred Brown Building. The applicant has advised that whilst every effort has been made to retain all proposed sustainability measures, those which are not essential to the operation of the building have been removed due to financial restrictions. These include a biomass boiler and roof-mounted PV panels. When consent was granted, Brunel University design team were advised that it should take all reasonable steps to ensure refurbishment of the building was sustainable. The sustainability officer has been consulted, and it's the officer's view that on balance the removal of non-essential PV installations and biomass boilers would be acceptable, given the revised EPC rating, that's the Energy Performance Certificate rating of B, would be achieved, which is still very good. And therefore the application is recommended for approval. I would also draw members' attention to the addendum for item 8, which just clarifies some acronyms in case you were wondering what they were in the report.
Are there any plans or photographs that need to be shown on this one?
There aren't, actually. It's just a location plan for this one. So it just indicates where it is, but it doesn't really show you very much. Okay.
Colleagues, it seems as though an argument is being put forward. The outcome is such that there is a reasonable efficiency rating for the building, and the argument's been put that it was an unreasonable requirement to have these ancillary measures, particularly on a refit. Councillor Yarrow.
Thank you, Chairman. I move the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Morse.
I wanted to ask a question.
Please do,
Fine.
then.
Essentially, have we all, because I don't know the history of the site and can't get to a briefing, essentially have all the new buildings construction of the site gone to grade A, is this only being allowed because it's a previous building?
That was a material consideration in coming to the decision, the fact that it was a refurbishment. Yes. So the answer is yes.
The conditions and standards of the other buildings is not necessarily a matter before us. What we have to consider is the merits of this planning application. So what we have before us is a refit building where reasonable requirement has to be made to improve the efficiency. The outcome of the proposed way forward is an efficiency rating B, which our specialist has said is a good outcome from a building of this age. Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Kashid. A show of hands, please, on this one then. That's unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item 9, 215A Long Lane.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Item 9 relates to 215A Long Lane. So this application seeks planning permission to convert two buildings, indicated here in red, to one building. This proposal will result in the loss of one unit, and it should be noted that local and strategic and national policies encourage the growth in housing numbers, and if we are not, in order for us to meet our housing need, we need to make sure that current housing stock is replaced and not diminished. So draw attention to policy HA, which states that the loss of a building will only be permitted if it's replaced within the boundary of the site, or if there are particular exceptions. In this case, none have been demonstrated to the council that there is an exception for this loss of unit. Furthermore, the proposal will significantly alter the bulk. I'll just take you through some plans. So this is the existing plan. So you can see there are just two modest 4 bedroom, 2 separate dwellings, and this is again a plan of the existing site, and this is going to be converted into one large dwelling with an addition of a 2-story rear extension and this element to the rear. This is what it's proposed to look like. Officers consider that it will significantly alter the overall bulk spacing between the building by joining 2 detached properties with one large property with a slightly higher roof. It's also considered that the proposed extension will result in the loss of an important gap between the 2 properties and the cohesiveness of the 3 dwellings that these properties form part of. The overall architectural composition will change, and as such we recommend a refusal on the loss of a unit and its visual harm.
Okay, colleagues. Comments, discussion? Councillor Yarrow?
Well, I'll go first on this one, as it happens to be in my ward, and I think the most serious thing is the fact that we're going to lose one property just to increase the size of another one. And I can't say that I'm supportive of that. So it is my opinion that we should support the officer's recommendations and not allow this.
Thank you very much. Any other views? Councillor Stead?
Thank you, Chair. No, I was going to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. Formally proposed and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please, on this one? That is unanimous. The application is refused for the 2 reasons given in the report. And we now turn to agenda item 10, 66 Fairway Avenue. Thank you.
Okay, 66 Fairway Avenue. This application relates to a detached extended bungalow located on the northern side of Fairway Avenue. It's also situated in the West Drayton Garden City area of special local character. The proposal involves increasing the height of the building from 5 metres to 7 metres. It would include a side dormer and a front extension, including a porch. The existing dwelling forms part of a distinct pair of bungalows, and the proposed dormer would be disproportionate. It doesn't relate well to the overall roof form. I will talk you through the proposals. So here is the existing building. It's quite modest. and this is the proposal. So there's quite a substantial side dormer, and the overall height of the roof is also increasing. So that's from that to that. And this is the side elevation, so there's quite a significant change there. It's considered inappropriate in this context, and officers recommend refusal because it would also be out of keeping with the area of special local character. So, here are some pictures as well to give you an idea of the pair and how this will significantly be altered. Again, the front.
Thank you. Could I just ask for a little bit of comments regarding the detail in refusal reason 2, and this is about the detriment to the amenity of number 64 Fairway Avenue. Could you describe how that detriment occurs, the consequence of this extension on number 64, in a little bit more detail for the committee? Thank you.
Just flick back to a location plan for you. So the detriment would occur because the side extent dormer would be relatively large in the context of the neighbouring. You know, it would add significant bulk to the neighbouring. You know, the area where, so to the side, which is to the east, and it would create because number 64 is also a bungalow. If we just look through, it's number 6. Yeah, here it is. This is number 64 here, and this is where the increase. So the addition of windows and the addition of the bulk, officers consider would result in
If I can just clarify this, so number 64 is the two-storey property on the right-hand side, and it has a kitchen window that would have a major impact in terms of its light and outlook. So I think what we need to do is to check whether there's a valid refusal reason to, but whether in terms of the text we've got too many concerns being raised in that refusal reason. So there's definitely a loss of outlook. There's definitely a loss of light to the kitchen.
The officer in the planning history further clarifies that number 64 has raised particular concern, and the reason for this is there's already very limited light. The addition of height by 2 meters, the addition on that side of the building of an additional side dormer would further diminish their light, and there would be an overbearing effect. So whilst it may pass, they haven't carried out a daylight and sunlight report to indicate otherwise. So in that context, this second reason for refusal is considered valid.
Thank you. I understand, but for my clarification and understanding, we have previously allowed these sorts of impacts where the room involved is non-habitable. And this is a kitchen, it isn't a habitable room per se. And we've had this in the past where windows on the flank walls have been impacted by development, and that has been allowed. And I wondered why this particular development is different. What makes this kitchen so important that it shouldn't be impacted in this way?
I don't believe it's a gully kitchen. So, for example, we would have allowed those sorts of instances when it's just a single kitchen, a tiny kitchen, which probably wouldn't have a diner. But if there is scope for a kitchen and diner, then... But it's overall It's the proximity and also the scale and the fact that there's also already very little light received by this kitchen or this habitable room.
I think there is some clarification needed here, because page 56 there's comments from the planning inspectorate that I think we need to sort this one out to ensure that we are being consistent here in our application.
I think you're absolutely right, Chairman, so I'm reflecting on the report, and refusal reason 1 I think is straightforward, but refusal reason 2, and obviously there may be an issue with taking into account a previous appeal decision and other site-specific issues. And I think unfortunately officers are going to need to take this report away and review reason 2, because we need to be absolutely clear whether that is correct or not. I know reason 1 is correct, but unfortunately I'm sat here and I'm not 100% sure refusal reason 2 is correct. So I think I'm going to have to either have to be deferred or withdrawn from the agenda, whatever the...
I think probably deferment to clarify this issue and the impact on it. And I do apologise for not having noted this earlier and brought it out. It just came as part of the discussion that I noted it, and so I think deferment, if proposed. Councillor Yarrow?
Thank you, Chairman. I propose we defer this for further investigation.
Thank you very much. Is that seconded? Thank you very much, Councillor Kashid. Show of hands, please, on that one. We'll defer this one to resolve the appropriateness of refusal reason 2. Thank you. Item 11 is the Section 106-278 report, and that is for noted. Thank you. We're now going to move into Part 2. We'll just break the link